but I recently spoke with Robert Sapolsky about his views on free will, or the lack thereof. And most, philosophers like Dan Dennett are compatibilists in the sense that they believe in free will and its compatibility with determinism, or even if the world is not ultimately deterministic, with physics, however physics plays out. But I'm wondering if panpsychism, as a panpsychist, do you sort of follow Dennett's or Sean Carroll's views on free will, or if there is a different way of going about arguing for free will that sort of preserves maybe Sapolsky's intuitions about what free will ought to be.
I mean, firstly, panpsychists can think all sorts of different things on this, and I'm somewhat agnostic. Luke Roloff's a very good panpsychist who's a compatibilist. As you say, that is a kind of consensus position in philosophy. I'm not convinced by the case of people like Sapolsky that we know enough empirical facts to rule out strong libertarian free will. Although that doesn't mean it exists. But actually, one of the interesting things in my new book, for me, the big challenge perhaps the biggest challenge for a libertarian worldview, where there's this, very strong free will that's where we have some decisions that lack prior causes. One of the big challenges is most libertarians think this kind of causation, human agency, is radically different from the kind of causation we find in the inanimate world and maybe in the rest of the biological world. In the biological world, in the inanimate world, things are compelling other things to do stuff. The toy example of the billiard ball hits the other billiard ball, makes it fly across the room. Whereas in human beings, suddenly we can freely choose without any prior causes. Well, what I sketch out in the consciousness chapter of my new book is a view I call Pan-agentialism, where in a sense, not just consciousness, but the roots of agency go all the way down to the fundamental level. And I suggest there's a coherent picture, consistent with everything we know empirically, according to which, in a sense, particles are very, very crude kind of agent or proto-agent, that they are never compelled to act. Rather, they are other particles induce in them certain inclinations to act, and then they follow their inclinations. And then the thought is, because particles are kind of really stupid, they can't rationally deliberate, they don't understand stuff, they're inevitably going to follow their inclinations. So if you're I don't know whether to take any of that again, because I got a bit, whether to go back a bit.
I think it was good.
Yeah, it's okay. If you're a mature human being and you feel like doing something, you have a desire to do something, you can deliberate, you can think, is this a good idea? Maybe I don't want to lash out in anger. Maybe I don't want to eat the unhealthy food. But if you're, say, a very young infant and you desire something, you're going to go for it, right? So the thought is, because particles are just the simplest conceivable kind of agent, because they can't rationally deliberate and have any of these more sophisticated responses, they inevitably just follow their desires, and that's why we get a predictable world. Anyway, that's I spell this out in much more detail. One attraction of this position is, if you're a libertarian, you have a much more, what I always like, a more unified, simple picture of reality. Human consciousness is not just, human agency is not this radically new thing, human free will. It's just a highly evolved form of what exists right down to the basic level of physics. So I'm not sure that view is right, but I think it removes, to my mind, the most serious objection to libertarianism. I'm not persuaded by either the scientific or the philosophical arguments against libertarian free will. So the availability of this pan-agentialist view does, I think, leave open the reality of libertarian free will as a serious live option. I mean, that doesn't mean it does exist. It's the reality of free will is much less certain, at least, than the reality of consciousness. It's much more possible that we're under the illusion that we have free will than we are under the illusion that we're feeling pain or something. So I'm somewhat agnostic.